and we have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And it's official.
Da-da-da-da!
The area outside the Stonewall where the rebellion took place is now a national monument signed by President Obama.
We have full wall-to-wall coverage.
We were there.
We were there. I got a little kiss from Kirsten Gillibrand, just on the cheek.
That's our U.S. Senator.
It felt good. Millions participated in pride marches across the country, defiant in the wake of the Orlando massacre. We'll give you some details, especially from New York.
We got some good news from Mississippi. Let me say that again. We got some good news from Mississippi, where some of their so-called religious freedom law was struck down in federal court.
And maybe more of it by the time you hear this. And there is progress in the fight to cover gay, lesbian, bisexual people using the Prohibition Against Sex Discrimination in Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
And how about that Pope? He made another nice sounding statement about respect for gay people, but he won't back it up with any concrete changes.
I'm amazed at the number of people who fell for that.
Oh my God.
Ridiculous.
I mean, no, people were, well, we'll talk about it.
We will. A town in Michigan enacts an LGBT rights ordinance, but a town in Arkansas repeals theirs. And
Mike Huckabee, you might remember him, he got socked for $25,000 for unauthorized use of Eye of the Tiger when he used it at a rally for Kim Davis when she was being prosecuted.
What a good guy he is to pay up.
Oh, well, we'll tell you how we found out about this.
Okay. But we start here in New York at the epicenter, or the starting point for the modern LGBT movement.
It's not as deep as the Grand Canyon. It's not as tall as the Statue of Liberty, but it is in the same category, a national monument declared by President Obama. Congress wouldn't act to make it a national park, but the Park Service will be running that area now as a national monument. And all the park rangers were there, and the politicians were there, and Stonewall veterans were there.
Yeah, so this was outside the Stonewall Inn on Christopher Street at Sheridan Square here in New York City, where in June of 1969, the patrons of the bar fought back, and street people fought back after one too many raids by the New York City police trying to shut down the bar and harass
6 nights of rebellion. This thing went on for 6 nights. There were documentaries about it. You should know all about it. I hope you all know all about it.
It is not the first time that gay people fought the cops. There was Compton Cafeteria and the riot there
people
in California,
yes. 1966.
And certainly various, go to Oscar Wilde, go to Plato, go to the beginning of time. There have been LGBT people in various incarnations having to fight authorities.
So why was the Stonewall so significant? Actually, they didn't actually get to that. And Jim Farrat, who was a participant in the Stonewall Rebellion, walked out of the ceremony. So there were little acts of rebellion. And we're going to show you another one later.
Yes.
But here's the thing that why Stonewall was significant. And they did talk about what went before and what went after, and we're not finished and all that stuff. But the Stonewall Rebellion was so significant because it led to immediate, militant, ongoing organizing that didn't stop. David Carter, who wrote the book on Stonewall, said, at the time of Stonewall, there were like 30 gay groups in the country. 2 years later, there were 1,500 groups in the United States. That's what the significance of Stonewall is. And of course, it happened in the context of the women's movement, the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, all these things bubbled up. And a lot of the people who did the organizing afterwards had already been involved in these movements and now said, our time has come.
Yes.
And that's why it happened.
And movements learned from each other and built on each other, and there was cross-membership, of course, in all these movements. Yes, ongoing meetings, actions, zaps, taking over the Marriage Bureau in New York, attacks on corporations for discrimination, on and on and on.
Right.
All of that did start in an ongoing, organized way from the Stonewall Rebellion.
I mean, the Gay Liberation Front was founded on the third night of the rebellion, during the rebellion. So we have a picture of one of the Stonewall participants, Tommy Lanigan Schmidt, who spoke at the ceremony. There he is. And he spoke, he painted the picture of what the bar was like back in 1969. Tommy takes a very romantic view that, and perhaps, it's all very hard to sort out why everything happened, but he says, this is a place, first of all, he said it was a dingy place. It was a mafia-run bar, but we were allowed to slow dance, and this was the only place that we were allowed to touch each other in a public place and go to. And he says he thinks that taking that away from us is part of what sparked the rebellion. That's his view.
Well, there was a lot of rage at lack of respect and at the kind of abuse that people were subjected to on an ongoing basis. And the people were just fed up and had had enough. I like seeing him there at a lectern behind the National Park Service sign. It was quite a turnout of politicians at this ceremony. Valerie Jarrett was there from the White House. Sally Jewell, we
have a picture of everybody. Why don't we get it up?
Yes, as they unveiled the sign about the monument.
There it is.
Okay,
so there's Carolyn Maloney on the far left. And
next to Edie Windsor.
Now, Edie Windsor, let's slow down. Edie Windsor leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And she's 87 years old, so she left out under God, because that's the way you learned it when she was a kid. And I thought that was terrific.
Fantastic.
And there's Jerry Nadler, who just got renominated for Congress.
And
let me just say about Jerry Nadler. Jerry Nadler is there in the blue suit right next to the sign. This would not have happened without Jerry Nadler, and I'm not just taking his part. This had to be coordinated at the local level to get all the local groups and local community to agree to give a city park, Christopher Park, which is right there, to the federal government. And you had to get the neighborhood to buy in, you had to get activists to buy in, and Jerry is credited with quarterbacking this.
So the tall white guy in the back behind Jerry is the mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, and the African-American woman in front of him is his wife, Shirlane McCrae, ex-lesbian.
Well, I know she's an ex-lesbian, but she was an out lesbian activist back in the day.
I think she sort of flirted with a current description of herself as bisexual.
Good.
Yeah.
And then there's
directly behind
Jerry is Corey Johnson, who's the council member who was not born when the Stonewall happened, and who talks about when he was 18, the first time he went to the city, the first place he went was Christopher Street. He says, I didn't even know where the Stonewall was. I just knew I had to go to Christopher Street. And then
in the middle, with the pink scarf around her neck, is the Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell.
And she's a cross-dresser. She emphasizes the fact that she wears pants, and that, which is a form of liberation.
Women can wear pants.
Yes.
And next to her, on the right of her, is the guy in the ranger hat. He is the director of the National Park Service.
That's Jarvis, yes.
And then Valerie Jarrett in the lovely blue dress or suit or whatever that is, with the lighter blue scarf around her neck, looking very cute from the White House. She's like our biggest friend in the White House. Everything pro-LGBT that has come out of the White House has come through Valerie Jarrett.
And then there's State Senator Brad Hoylman there next to Valerie Jarrett. And Brad gets up and says, President Obama, who just signed this, is our first gay president. Well, there you are. And right next to him, the woman in front of him is Deborah Glick, who was the first out elected lesbian or gay person to the New York State Legislature in 1990. So quite a crowd, yeah.
A lot of history, and every last one of them spoke for at least an hour.
No.
It did go on and on and on. There was too little speaking by Stonewall vets and
Octavia
activists.
Lewis, the transgender activist, did
Yes.
speak very well. Actually, Octavia did a great thing. And keep this in mind when you're doing any public speaking. Listen to what other people say and add to it. Don't just say the same thing that they said. And she sort of dialogued with what everybody else had said. That was good.
Yes, it was good.
And there was another act of rebellion. Some people got it in their minds to unfurl a banner at this thing, totally unauthorized. Can we take a look at that?
It's a Queer Nation banner made by Gilbert Baker, of course, and it says "equal in every way."
Sadly, Ann Northrup on the left is cut out of the picture, but there's there's our friend Shep Wanan. There's a member of GOAL, the Gay Officers Action League, and others who just picked up the slack. And they let us stand there the entire time with this banner, which was unplanned.
If they tried to get us to leave, we would have started another rebellion.
Well,
but the message of the banner is that we see ourselves as equal in every way, but we are not. The Queer Nation tagline is equal in every way except under the law.
Oh.
So that is part of what we continue to fight for and what we'll actually get to in a minute in other contexts.
But that wouldn't fit on Christopher Street, which is a very narrow street.
Well, what was nice was that, they had the Stonewall bar and then this whole platform set up in front of it that you saw Tommy speaking at, and then the audience and all those politicians, and behind them a big riser with all the press, and we positioned ourselves behind the platform so that all the press shots included that banner, and there was a lot of news coverage of this. I was surprised that this made the national news everywhere.
Absolutely.
It was
the first, well, to put it in historical context, it's the first time an LGBT historic site has been made into a national monument. Some have been put on the list of historic places and things, a variety of things.
A number of them.
Including the Stonewall.
But this is the biggest,
long time ago.
The biggest and the most important, and it may end up yet as a national park. Now, the designation is for 7.7 acres, including Christopher Park, the Stonewall Inn, and the streets and sidewalks surrounding, which is important because that is where the rebellion took place. But what amused me is I'm reading this whole description and the official declaration and press releases, and it says, and as a national monument, there will be a ranger station and a visitor center. The ranger station and visitor center, where are they going to put that?
Well, they could take over the nail parlor, which is next to the bar, which was part of was the entrance to the bar back in '69. I wasn't there. I was 15 years old. Although our friend Steve Ashkenazi said he used to go when he was 16 because they didn't card you.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, where they're going to stick a visitor center and a ranger station is a question, but that's the level of this.
I would think the least we could do is get the lease on the nail parlor.
All right, you work on that.
And then, of course, Governor Cuomo, right before Pride, he always likes to dish out a couple of things. One, he did something on AIDS, which we'll talk about later. But he also said, I want a national monument. I want a memorial. I want a memorial to the victims of Orlando and all victims of anti-LGBT violence. Well, I have to say, if you want to do something about it, let's work on LGBT liberation. And I certainly don't want this. I don't want this in the Stonewall Park. I mean, let's,
terrible.
Put it in his office.
Well, there are several sites that have been suggested. It's all just in the announcement stage. But really, there's a lot more we could do rather than another monument to victims of violence. Actually, Mark Siegel of Philadelphia, publisher of the Philadelphia Gay News and author of the book recently, who was here, had an excellent idea, which is to rename the Equality Act for Orlando in some way, which might help it move along, although lip service has been the order of the day. Right. In fact, what I loved last week was the congressional rebellion, reminiscent a little of Stonewall, where the Democrats staged their sit-in wearing rainbow ribbons.
Because there was gay people who were killed, and most of them Latino, almost all of them.
And because Congress had yet again done a moment of silence without doing anything concrete, and for some reason the Democrats chose that as their moment to say, enough of this, we're tired of words and no action. It was quite surreal to see Nancy Pelosi on the front lawn of the Capitol singing "We Shall Overcome."
If you were on my Facebook page, you will notice that I constantly quote our suffragette sisters who said, deeds, not words. Deeds we want.
Yeah, but I did appreciate the civil disobedience. And I actually think that that sentiment started a couple of weeks earlier when they went through the whole charade about the Sean Patrick Maloney amendment codifying non-discrimination in hiring by federal contractors, and the Democrats ended up yelling shame, shame, shame at the Republicans. And I thought, whoa, that is something new.
That's something we do all the time.
Well, we do it, but it doesn't usually happen on the floor of Congress. And I think that was the precursor to the sit-in by Congress.
Congress is getting out of hand, but everything's sort of getting out of hand in the world.
It
as
is.
you know, whether it's the horror in Turkey or the chaos in Britain, which is very fueled by racism to a great extent, although not entirely, of course, because a lot of people have been left out of globalization. It's not these aren't simple issues, but we hate to see it.
So the Stonewall ceremony took place on Monday, immediately after the Pride Parade here in New York and others around the country, in Chicago and San Francisco and
Seattle had a 500,000 people.
You know who marched in Chicago?
Oh, Mark Kirk.
Senator Mark Kirk, Republican, closet case, trying desperately to get reelected.
I could say some closet cases in the New York Parade too, but I'm not going to because we're feeling proud. All right. So the New York Parade. I mean, a lot of people. I've talked to a lot of people who had not marched in many years, including you.
Me.
Who came back for this because of the Orlando thing.
Yes, well, because there was a political component to the parade, and it wasn't just dancing and corporations. Although I must say, I read the line of march and almost decided not to go because hundreds of corporations were marching in this Pride Parade, and it just was so depressing to read. The parade kicked off at noon and ended at 8:40 p.m.
It proceeds at a glacial pace. It's insane. It's abusive. I was able to be I'm elderly. I was able to be on my feet for about 5 hours.
As me.
5 hours. You're in better shape than I am. I was able to be on my feet for 5 hours covering this thing, talking to people. And, what I heard was certainly talking to people about what they want to do in the wake of what happened in Orlando. A lot of people are talking about gun control and banning guns and things like that.
Well,
but I also heard a lot of anger, fed up with politicians and religious leaders who spew anti-gay hatred, and we don't separate ourselves from them, and the political establishment doesn't separate themselves from them. It's allowed. I mean, Danny O'Donnell, who's an assembly member here, said he wants to go after these religious groups and stop their state funding.
And the unending list of right-wingers who sent their condolences to the people of Orlando and then turn right around and continue to discriminate against us. And
their condolences, they don't even mention LGBT people.
Well,
they don't mention Latinos either.
So the big event in the parade and right up front was this group, Gays Against Guns. And the idea is, and I approach it with some trepidation, because this idea that, now the big, powerful, organized gays are going to destroy the NRA when no one else has been able to. They gunned down 20 kids in an elementary school in Connecticut, and nothing changes, and we're going to change things. But there's a lot of energy for it. There's a lot of anger. And so Gays Against Guns marched behind a big Gays Against Guns banner made by Gilbert Baker. And Gilbert made another banner, which a few of us from Queer Nation sort of slipped into the Gays Without Guns contingent, and it is Republican hate kills.
And we got a very good reaction from the sidelines for
Yes.
that. We're a nonpartisan show here, of course, but that got a lot of nice reactions.
I must say the sideline crowds were bigger than I had seen for a long time, although I have skipped the parade in recent years. But I was impressed by how many people were on the sidelines and the support they gave to the Gays Without Guns contingent. And front page of the New York Times.
If you can get a shot of this, yeah, there's, well, there it is.
Well, they had arranged for 49 people to wear white, including white veils, and with pictures around their necks to represent the 49 people killed.
One of whom was
Orlando.
Alan Cumming, but we don't know where he was because
He was one of the marchers,
yeah.
not one of the people killed.
No. One of the people who was marching in white. That's what I meant, of course.
And that image is going to be carried through. They're going to do more demonstrations. So Gays Without Guns now exists as
Gays Against Guns.
Gays Against Guns, thank you.
There are some gays with guns. They're called the Pink Pistols.
Well, that's a little dicey fight that's going on. But Gays Against Guns is an ongoing group. They have a website. They're starting to do actions. And Queer Nation is also meeting and putting together actions relevant, related, tangential. The idea is to fight homophobia, fight gun violence, fight all this stuff.
Fight male violence is one of the big themes.
Yes. But to get organized and get moving again. We've been a little too passive lately, and we want to get out in the streets and do stuff.
The other thing I noticed in the parade is what I noticed, because I've been to, this was my 43rd straight one, so to speak, and the emergence of conservative institutions where people are out, certainly police and firefighters and things like that. But look, there was a FBI, FBI had a contingent in the parade. They had 50 people. And the woman who heads the New York office said, we're not the old FBI. Well, I should hope not. J. Edgar Hoover's turning over in his grave, in his closeted grave.
Usually they just show up anonymously at our meetings.
That's right.
And try to disrupt us.
The FBI. Well, yeah. And then we have another picture there of there was a big contingent from the Gay Officers Action League of 300 uniformed officers, two of whom, and they were carrying their banner, were the first out trans cops in the parade. And they made a little handmade banner that said trans officers. And wow, I mean, it's
served with pride.
And to continue on the Orlando theme, I was along the sidelines. There was this guy holding a banner with pictures of all of the people who died at the Pulse. I thought, is this something everybody has? No. The guy on the right there, his name was Joseph Santiago, 25 years old. He just moved to New York from Orlando, June 7th, and he pointed to 5 of the people on that banner who he was personal friends with, who died in that catastrophe. So it was quite moving.
Yeah, getting less publicity as all this went on were the 2 of the Grand Marshals, Jazz Jennings,
Yes.
who's the star of the I Am Jazz show and a great transgender teen activist, and Suri Nahi
From Syria.
Yes, who I saw featured at the Logo Trailblazers Awards over the weekend, who has an amazing story of having come out of Syria as an out gay man and the work he is doing with refugees. He was also a Grand Marshal. And I went to the Dyke March the night before, Saturday night.
God. How was that?
I had to hand out flyers for the Queer Nation meeting.
And you got a
The
good...
Dyke March was great. There were thousands of women, mostly young, with certainly a lot of us veterans too, but great energy. And then, I like to walk out of plays halfway through. Well, I wanted to walk out of the Dyke March halfway through too, so I peel off and I turn west on 28th Street, and I'm walking down the sidewalk, and who's coming right at me, but it didn't register with me till she was past me? Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton
Just
walked
walking
right
along the
by
street.
me on the sidewalk. I figured she was in her car. She couldn't get across Fifth Avenue because of the Dyke March. Her daughter lives right there. She must have been going to see the grandkids, see the daughter. She had one big security guy and 2 Secret Service people behind her. That was it. That was the whole entourage, and they're just walking down the sidewalk.
Should have asked her to come on the show.
I should have, but I was so gobsmacked, as they say.
Hillary did slip into the march for 15 minutes.
She walked 4 blocks
She had a car. She had a car. She
into the Pride March.
She had popped out of the car down in the Village near the Stonewall, popped into the march. I guess it's better that she did that than not show up.
Donald Trump was not in the Pride March,
and you can't miss him if he's there.
And he has been asked formally about his opinion on the Equality Act and has not replied.
All right.
We report, you decide.
All right. Do you want to talk a little bit about Orlando or go to any of that stuff? Or
I was going to go to legislation, stuff like that.
Let's do. Okay.
In Pennsylvania, the Senate committee there passed a sexual orientation, gender identity, non-discrimination law for housing and employment. But one senator in the full Senate is stalling this and holding it up. They've been fighting for non-discrimination laws in Pennsylvania for a long time. They're having demonstrations in Harrisburg, but it is stalled at the moment.
Something very disturbing in North Carolina. We were hoping they would just get rid of their stupid anti-LGBT law, but they're trying to work some real horrible compromise. I understand in response mainly to the National Basketball Association threatening to pull out the All-Star game from Charlotte next year. So somebody, drafted what they thought was a compromise, and every advocate is saying, forget about it. That's not going to help.
It's no good. But meanwhile, a federal court there is letting the Department of Justice keep sending millions of dollars to North Carolina under the Violence Against Women Act, even though the Department of Justice is suing the state over this HB2. And there are specific legal provisions that say if you are suing the state over this, the money gets cut off. But both the Department of Justice and the state asked for the funding to continue, and the court said, well, I really shouldn't be doing this, but I will let the funding continue because otherwise too many people will be harmed.
Okay. We did make some progress this week with the whole idea of anti-gay or bisexual or lesbian discrimination. Transgender is another matter, and that's being handled differently, is sex discrimination under the Civil Rights Act of 1964. We had the first settlement in a lawsuit where this was raised as an issue. Now, of course, when you make a settlement, you're not admitting any wrongdoing, but they must have thought they were going to lose at the EEOC. And this was a case against the pallet companies.
A lesbian had been bashed at work, harassed and gay bashed. The settlement.
Well, she was getting comments like, "I want to turn you back into a woman. You would look good in a dress."
Yeah.
Her name was Yolanda Boone. She's getting $182,000.
And they're also giving $20,000 to the Human Rights Campaign, and they're promising to do training.
But they didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and there's another lawsuit, the Christensen lawsuit, in federal court, also arguing for sex discrimination to be seen to include sexual orientation discrimination.
This is against Omnicom Group.
So a lot of amicus briefs filed this week, including by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and 128 members of the House of Representatives arguing for this interpretation.
And isn't the Obama administration arguing for reversal as well?
Not yet.
Not yet?
No.
Okay.
No, just the EEOC.
Come on now. Come on.
Okay.
Deeds, not words.
And in Mississippi.
Deeds, not parks.
In Mississippi.
Yes. This is a big decision.
We've been waiting for a decision on various lawsuits challenging HB 1523 in Mississippi, which is the law that is the broadest religious exemption law in the country, and says if you say, hey, I'm religious, you can discriminate against anybody for anything.
If you're a clerk and you don't want to do a same-sex marriage.
Well, that was part of it. But the federal court this week said that clerks cannot be exempt from providing licenses under this law, that is too broad an exemption, that they have to follow the Supreme Court marriage ruling.
The judge, Carlton Reeves, said the marriage license issue will not be adjudicated anew after every legislative session. It's legal now. Enforce it.
And since the HB 1523 law is supposed to go into effect July 1st, we are expecting a decision from the judge by tomorrow about whether or not the full law can go into effect. So there could
affect the school bathroom policies for transgender students, other religious objections,
everything. You can raise a religious objection to anything. So I expect we'll have a decision on that by the time you see this show. So look for what's happening in Mississippi.
If only
I'm optimistic.
The governor, Phil Bryant, would accept his gay son.
Yeah. All right. In Oregon, a judge has ruled that a person can identify as non-binary, neither male nor female, but the Department of Motor Vehicles is not ready for that, so you can't get a driver's license identifying yourself as non-binary.
In Portage, Michigan, I hope I'm saying that right, the City Council passed an LGBT non-discrimination ordinance that protects us from discrimination in housing, employment, and public services.
But in Texarkana, Arkansas, outside agitators have come in and convinced them to repeal their non-discrimination law.
Well, they passed it like last year, didn't they?
Yeah, and the locals were fine with it. But
and it was unanimous when they passed it.
You know, these outsiders come in, they spend a lot of money. It's all the right-wing haters.
You've got to stand up to the pressure. In Massachusetts, there's a snag in the transgender rights.
Maybe.
There's different versions in the House and Senate, and they're having some trouble coming to agreement.
Well, maybe not. The Massachusetts people say the worry is overblown, and we'll get this done by the end of the session in a few days. So we'll see. We'll see whether they do.
Speaking of transgender, two trans folks are going to be candidates for Congress in the fall. They won Democratic primaries. In Utah, Misty Snow is going to oppose Mike Lee for the Senate seat out there.
Wow.
Very conservative. Utah.
For the U.S. Senate, Misty Snow, trans woman, local business owner, very progressive, beat a primary opponent by like 30 points, very popular, but beating Mike Lee in Utah.
And they sometimes elect statewide Democrats there. Locals.
Well, that would be a big upset if she beats Mike Lee. We'll see. Let's see how much the Democratic National Committee pours into that race.
Well, Utah's a funny state because it's one of those ones that it's very conservative, always votes Republican for president, which is not disposed towards Donald Trump very, very much.
That could help us. And in Colorado, another Misty Plowright has won the Democratic nomination for a House seat against Representative Doug Lamborn, who is a popular right-wing conservative. So I don't know that she has much chance either. But these are two trans women who have, and Misty Plowright is an Army vet, or a vet of some service branch, and they're both terrific to run these primary races and win them and take on these right-wing conservatives.
And now some news for our fellow senior citizens. In New York, they're going to build the first affordable senior housing north of Philadelphia in New York. One of them is going to be in the Bronx, and one of them is going to be in Fort Greene, Brooklyn. Yeah. Total of 227 units of affordable housing.
Get your applications in now.
Yeah. Well, apparently there's a lot of discrimination against LGBT older couples who apply for senior housing.
Yeah.
That's sad to hear, especially in New York.
Bulletin, the National Organization for Marriage held its annual March for Marriage in the District of Columbia, and
Oh, actually, that's where the 237 number comes from, because that's how many they had.
200, and that included journalists. They didn't do well. In Anchorage, Alaska, there was a big fight at the Pride Fest there between gays and Christian protesters.
So you remember that Mike Huckabee was the presidential candidate who stood by Kim Davis and had a big rally for her when she was being taken to court. And he played at the rally Eye of the Tiger by the group Survivor, and he was fined $25,000 for this, for misuse. Now, how did they find out about it? Because it was settled out of court. He filed it as a campaign expense on his federal election records.
Hey, I'm sure he got some votes out of that. Not enough. I was interested in the analysis of the Supreme Court ruling on the Texas abortion law, because what they said, and I think this has implications for us.
Yes.
The ruling says that the Texas law purports to protect women. But the excellent decision by Breyer says this is all absolute malarkey. It does not protect women. It harms women. It restricts their rights and their choices, and does not protect them with better facilities or anything like that. And that is the same analysis that can be used against these trans bathroom laws, where like North Carolina claims we are protecting people in the state. We're protecting children. We're protecting women by restricting the use of bathrooms by trans people. And all of that is going to be blown out of the water. And this Supreme Court ruling on abortion is going to be very, very helpful in that.
And the court also rejected appeals from Wisconsin and Mississippi over laws that would require abortion providers having admitting privileges at a hospital near their clinic. Following
on the Texas decision.
Yes.
We buried the lead. We're expecting this week, possibly, the rumors are a little shaky, that the Department of Defense will officially lift its ban on open service by transgender individuals. The rumor is they're going to do it by July 1st. This will be huge news if trans people, of whom there are estimated to be 15,000 currently serving in the U.S. Armed Forces, if they actually are allowed to serve openly.
And if you don't think transgender people have it tough, you may have seen the viral video of a transgender woman named Pearl Love on a New York City subway getting harassed viciously by a woman sitting across from her who eventually hit her. So that woman who hit her is going to have her day in court on July the 6th. And we're going to have a demonstration by Everything Transgender in NYC on July 6th at One Police Plaza at 5:30 p.m. It is expected that the perpetrator here, her name is Sarah Eldridge, will be ordered to undergo anger management for a total of 4 hours. She needs 4 years of therapy.
Well, she keeps saying that she's the victim.
Yeah.
And she's sitting on a subway. Meanwhile, just one footnote on the military story. The Navy is urging thousands of people who were discharged inappropriately, given dishonorable discharges because they were LGBT, to appeal those discharges. They can get their records changed. They can get benefits they're entitled to. And they say even if misconduct was alleged, clearly a lot of that was about just being gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgendered, and that can be appealed. So if you are sitting there with a dishonorable discharge, consider appealing that.
And by the way, there was another Supreme Court victory, big one this week, over discrimination based on religious objections in the public sphere. Pharmacies that don't want to dispense contraceptives and things, and the justices said, no, you gotta, you can't do that, and they are enforcing Washington's law that says if you're running a pharmacy, you got to give people whatever they're prescribed.
And the court in Virginia has ordered the school to let trans man Gavin Grimm use the boys' bathroom, even though the state is trying to appeal their ruling in his favor to the Supreme Court. The federal court says you're not keeping him from the bathroom while you institute that appeal. He gets to use the boys' room.
There was a great crowd out in Seattle for Pride, but afterwards there was, in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, an assailant who shouted, "Hey, happy Pride," before attacking a man, grabbing him by the throat, beating him further, leaving him unconscious. The victim drove home after coming to. A friend drove him to the hospital. Police are looking for a white man in his 20s.
And in New York City, a 25-year-old man was leaving a gay bar in Hell's Kitchen, says he was drugged, assaulted with a popper, which knocked him out, and taken elsewhere and raped. And bars in Manhattan and Brooklyn say they have been getting threatening calls after Orlando.
And speaking of Orlando, we should just, a couple of items that came up this week. As of, well, we haven't done a show since then, but as of June 22nd, all 49 bodies were finally claimed. One father apparently wouldn't claim his son because he was so ashamed that his son was gay. And so the authorities had to let other family members pick him up. That shows how much work we have to do.
I thought we were beyond that.
What else? Patty Sheehan read the riot act to Marco Rubio, who, over this whole thing, who won't vote for it. And then, the FBI is making these official statements saying, we are finding no evidence that Omar Mateen had any connection to gay stuff, gay apps, gay anything. But there are so many personal witnesses who say, I don't know what they're doing here. I saw the guy in the bar. I talked to him on this chat thing or whatever. I don't know what's going on. Are they trying to develop another narrative here? We're not trying. We're not invested in any narrative. I think the main thing seems to be that the guy was mentally ill. Some viewers have written, you're not dealing with the fact that he was an Islamic terrorist. Well, I think the guy was nuts, and that's what brought this about and made him fixate on us.
Yeah. In happier news, in Missouri, they held their local Miss Missouri contest, and the winner is an out lesbian, Erin O'Flaherty.
We do have a picture of her.
She will be competing in the Miss America pageant in Atlantic City in September. There she is in the middle, winning her crown.
Yeah.
Her platform is suicide prevention. A friend of hers in high school committed suicide. She was also Miss University of Central Florida, which has been involved in heavily in the Orlando things. She runs a clothes boutique, and she's a singer. Keep an eye on Miss Missouri and the Miss America pageant.
And I think it looks like we have our guest.
Our guest is here. Come on in.
Come on in. Join us.
Eliel Cruz, Executive Director of Faith in America. Got a little delayed, but has joined us. Nice to meet you. Hi. Come on in.
To meet each other.
Just in time. We're just getting to international news. And we asked you here to talk about the Pope and related subjects.
So, the Pope, tell us what you heard the Pope say this week.
So the Pope on the papal plane was asked about actually a different cardinal's comments, saying that the church needed to apologize to gays and lesbians.
A German cardinal named Reinhold Marx.
Cardinal Marx. And this was after Orlando. So he was asked about those comments, and he kind of echoed this statement saying that he agreed with the cardinal, saying that we do need to apologize, but we also need to apologize to people that we've also marginalized, the poor, women. I think he said something about weapons of communities that have blessed weapons of mass destruction. So he
and child labor.
So he kind of lumped in the LGBT community in the apology.
I thought he kissed it off.
He kind of lumped it into a large.
Changed the subject, but he also goes back to what he always says, which is that we should be respected. It's in the Catechism, and accompanied pastorally. So what it seems to be saying is, yeah, of course, welcome them, take them in. But of course, what he wants to move us to is the non-practice of homosexuality.
Yeah. Well, he says that in the Catechism, it says to be respected, but also the words that we are intrinsically disordered is also in the Catechism. So it's hard to say treat them with respect while using language that is inherently dehumanizing and language that in and of itself fuels the kind of oppression that he's apparently apologizing for. So, and I'm actually not exactly sure what he what is he apologizing for? Is he apologizing for the promotion of, ex-gay therapy? Is he apologizing for, I think it was last year, calling or comparing trans individuals to nukes? Like, what he didn't exactly give nuclear war. So he didn't actually give any specifics. It was kind of very broad. I don't
think he was apologizing.
I don't give too much weight to it simply because he didn't initiate it. He was asked about it, and he kind of just echoed it. He threw us all into a big lump. He didn't give any specifics, and it's hard to give apologies to the community that you refuse to evaluate how you're oppressing them actively now today.
But Eliel, he got headlines around the world saying Pope asks for forgiveness from gays. And we have people in our own community who said, I'm so moved by this. This is such tremendous progress. And I'm like, again, I've repeated the phrase.
We have fights with people on the street about this.
Yeah. Well, see, I do want to say it is some progress to have a pope have any kind of language that isn't just oppressive of LGBT people. He is. You have a low bar. Well, you also have the Catholic Church, which is a massive institution. Institutions don't change overnight. He's a new pope compared to how long they stay around, and
he does. He actually said he doesn't want to stay.
Eliel. The reason I wanted you here is you are
a
fierce critic.
I know, I am a critic, and I absolutely do agree. In my statement and my writings, I definitely am extremely critical. I do understand that it does take time to change, but I don't think that his words are actually backed up with any actions to change.
There aren't, and there's no excuse in 2016 for anybody to be putting out any of this garbage or discriminating against us or not allowing his cardinal in the Dominican Republic to say the hateful stuff he does without any criticism, allowing people to
very bad words.
And he lets us be fired all over the place by schools and churches and whatever. So let me go a little broader with you, because you're the executive director of Faith in America, which people know as the organization started by Mitchell Gold as a way to combat homophobia in faith communities. So how are we doing?
We've been busy, haven't we? After marriage equality, we're seeing a slew of anti-LGBT legislation where the root of all of the rhetoric comes in religious narratives. So I think more ever than before, LGBT groups have to respond directly to the religious narratives, which is something that we haven't necessarily had to do in the past with marriage equality. We could use very civil arguments and things, but when you have individuals who are saying it's part of their religious liberties to be able to discriminate against in the workplace or in the public arena or even somehow bathrooms, I think it's more important than ever to engage those arguments directly with religious narratives, because it's not just a sole religious argument to say that you're anti-LGBT. There's a lot of faith allies. There's a lot of LGBT people of faith, as myself. And so we're elevating those voices, and we're doing a lot of work in media trying to change some of those headlines. But we're busy.
Which denomination are you affiliated with?
I was born and raised in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, so I would say that that's Ben Carson's religion. So I have to throw that one out there. So that's one I most loosely affiliate myself with, if that makes sense.
Now, how do you read the political situation where Trump is now meeting with all these evangelicals, and Ben Carson is leading him into all this, and he's meeting with all these kill the gay pastors?
Well, I was actually at the Trump Towers protesting with ACT UP when they were meeting with the 400 or 500.
We were holding the Republican Hate Kills banner. Yes.
No, yeah, I think
I ran into Tony Perkins on the street and called him a killer.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's not the first time he's gotten that, no. But I think that it's really interesting. Trump is just a very odd case, and he's trying to gain a certain vote. All right, so he's courting these evangelical, quite extreme viewpoints to get the votes that he wants. I don't know if he actually believes half the things he says he believes, or if he's just trying to. He's a really weird case. I didn't think, in general.
Doesn't matter whether he believes it, because he's
platforming individuals who are espousing rhetoric that in and of itself is violent toward the LGBT community, and it's important to call that out for what it is.
You're talking about somebody who had trouble distancing himself from David Duke.
Yes.
Yeah. And what about these Title IX exemptions that colleges and universities are getting?
So essentially, the majority of my work has been on Christian campuses because I've only gone to Christian schools my entire life. And so I did a lot of grassroots organizing and helping change policies on Christian campuses to be more accommodating of LGBT individuals who attend those campuses.
And how does that manifest itself? What kind of changes have you
We're
wrought?
talking about including LGBT people underneath discrimination and harassment, getting some type of basic LGBT competency training for faculty members and even RAs or students who are working in any kind of capacity over LGBT students.
Do they allow LGBT groups at most of these campuses?
So no, and it's really interesting because they exist in a very unofficial way. It's really interesting politically. It depends on each of the campuses. And a lot of times, a lot of these students are going to these schools because their parents are saying you either go to a Christian school, we're not paying for a school, or they're not out at that time. You really can't tell your parents, I don't want to go to this Christian school because I'm, gay, bisexual, whatever it is. So it's just about making those kind of spaces safer. Now, these Title IX requests have really spiked in the past year or two, really as a result due to marriage equality.
And to explain to our audience, Title IX bans sex discrimination and is being read to ban discrimination again on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity.
And in 2014, the Department of Education included transgender identities in their Title IX reading, and that's when all the spikes and requests really came. And there's 60-something Christian schools who have requested these Title IX exemptions. I think we're going to be in a really interesting time where there's a lot of LGBT students on campus doing a lot of protests. They're doing a lot of organizing to get their schools to give back Title IX. I know there's a couple organizations like Campus Pride and Soul Force who I've worked with who are doing a lot of really great work with the students on campus. There's currently a law in California happening right now that the religious right is really demonizing, but it's essentially making the schools that are requesting Title IX to be transparent about it and say that we requested this so we can discriminate against you.
And they're talking about denying state funds to them.
So that's where we're a couple lawsuits away from getting to that point. Can we give funds, government funds to organizations and institutions, private institutions that are discriminating against LGBT individuals?
Right. I think it's outrageous. We do a lot of it in New York with social services and for all faiths, and it's outrageous.
So I have two hands in this because I think legally, any religious institution that wants to discriminate according to their religious beliefs should be able to, but they should not be able to receive funds.
Right.
Then, as a religious person, though, as a religious person who's like in-house, I argue about the theology behind that. What is there actually sound theology to discriminate against LGBT students? I don't think there is. So I come from it from two different ways. Legally, I think they should be able to, but they shouldn't be able to accept funds. Then, as a Christian, I just don't think they have a scriptural defense to justify.
How much traction are you getting with that? I mean, the clinging to these beliefs is like it's like if you take this out, you take this away from us, the ability to think that homosexuality is wrong, everything is going to fall apart.
Well, I think the majority of the requests are coming mainly because of transgender identities. And if you start poking into any of the denominations, any of the large denominations, there's very little theological research, at least officially done, on trans identities to justify their anti-trans stance. There's technically more anti-gay theology out there than there is anti-trans. So it's really coming not from a theological
dug up
standpoint.
a few things, and the Vatican has condemned trans identity.
The Vatican, yeah. I mean, there's been a few statements, but there's very little compared to anti-gay theology and statements there are in denominations, mainly because there isn't the scriptural backing like some would claim there is against homosexuality, right? Some would claim that there's a few verses, 5 or 6 verses that are against homosexuality. I disagree with them, but there's nothing in Scripture that even suggests trans identities.
I'm surprised.
So it's really interesting to see where we are in terms of the theology behind it.
They don't like it, they're going to justify it.
Yeah, they're going to justify it somehow, but it's a good way to point out, it's a kind of, point out the fact that they're justifying their anti-trans beliefs, not in Scripture, but in their own bigotry.
Absolutely, yes, exactly.
I'm surprised that some Catholic male priest has not transitioned, to.
I'm sure some have.
I'm sure. More than likely,
And
there
be out about it.
are trans priests.
And we only have a few seconds, but we see all these debates within denominations: the Presbyterians, the Methodists, the Catholics, others, Jewish, Muslim. Do you see it in general as making progress? Are we going to get somewhere?
Absolutely. We're in a really critical time where I think society, specifically our legal system, is pushing denominations to have to respond to things faster than they would normally. Usually this takes a lot longer of a time to even begin to have these conversations, but because of the law, how quickly the LGBT rights movement are able to achieve certain civil rights in the court system, denominations and religious institutions are having to respond just as quickly. So I think we're at a pivotal time.
Where can people learn more about Faith in America?
faithinamerica.org.
Okay. Have we had that up on the screen
Thanks,
the whole time?
Eliel.
I hope
Next time, more time.
Yes, I appreciate it.
You can sit with us, and if you hear anything here that interests you, you can chime in.
Feel free to comment, but we have some more
Thank you,
news
I
to get through.
appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Bye. International news. They took the advisory vote on marriage and civil unions in Bermuda. It turns out they didn't have enough votes to make it count at all, even though it was only advisory to begin with. Some thought, but we lost.
The premier said, all you closet cases in Parliament opposing this, what the hell is with you?
Yeah, and everyone else said, your homophobic wife made you have this referendum in the first place, which was unnecessary, and you should just go by the court decision, which says there should be marriage.
In the Czech Republic, gays and lesbians registered in partnerships, actually, they allow individual gays and lesbians to adopt, but not couples.
Well, now if you're in a couple, you can adopt as an individual. People, I'm not kidding, people are concerned that the Brexit vote is going to make homophobia more prevalent.
Oh, it has.
Yeah, and that the EU will not be as strong against homophobia.
They were chanting at people after the Pride Festival, the drunkenly, rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. First we'll get the Poles, then the gays. This is happening all over the country. It's like unleashed, all this. Don't let it happen here.
In Istanbul, the government did ban the Pride March that was supposed to take place this weekend. Gays showed up anyway there, and they dispersed throughout the city, which was a good thing to have a presence widely. The cops say they shot it down because they were afraid of violence, and given the massacre at the airport, one says, well, maybe.
Horrible thing in Istanbul.
The killer in Israel who killed young Shira Banki, 16, at the Pride Parade in Jerusalem, got life imprisonment plus 31 years.
Gay men in the Ivory Coast say they've been assaulted and forced to flee their homes because the U.S. Embassy put their pictures up after they signed a condolence book for the victims of Orlando.
India, they're still trying to get to decriminalize homosexuality after it was and then it wasn't. Some celebrities came out and filed a petition with the court, but the court said, no, we're not going to hear them just because they're personally involved.
Pakistan has cautiously, a religious decree says that transgender folks can marry, but those with visible signs of both genders may not marry.
If you can pass, you can marry, but if you're ambiguous, forget it. Shall we move on?
Sure.
In New York State, the governor has expanded AIDS-related benefits. Maybe.
Well, this is saying you can get housing benefits. You don't have to have an AIDS diagnosis. You just have to have HIV.
Yeah.
And that's a big breakthrough, something the movement's been working for many, many years.
Yeah. And in entertainment news, there are some interesting film festivals coming up in L.A. and Philadelphia, Outfest, Q-Flix, but the best one is going to be in Cherry Grove on Fire Island, the Outtakes Film Festival, July 15th through 17. All films shot in Cherry Grove and put together by our friend Lee Sharmat. Restored masterpieces, home movies, documentaries.
Look forward to it.
Outtakes Film Festival in Cherry Grove.
And William Finn's musical Falsettos is coming back to Broadway in September at the Walter Kerr with Andrew Rannells of Girls as Whizzer and Christian Borle as Marvin.
I love that play.
Well, that's a nice cast.
And there's a new series running online called We've Been Around that's 6 5-minute episodes on trans stories. We'vebeenaround.com. And that about sums it up. It was a heck of a week. And
yeah, we're exhausted.
Stay tuned to Gays Against Guns and Queer Nation, and get back into organizing and action.
Get on our email list and we'll send you notices of these things.
And
just go to our website, www.gayusatv.org.
And we will see you next week with updates on all of this. Bye-bye.